Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about the June Pick My Book selection from you guys. It was Don't Let Me Die by Alex Sinclair. I presented you guys with 5 options for which book you wanted me to read in June. This was the winner. This is a self-published psychological thriller about a woman who is forced to choose between her son's life or her husband's life. Only one of them can live, and it's up to her to make the choice. Now, the strangest thing happened with this experience. Not long after this was voted as the book that I needed to read, one of my subscribers mentioned trying to find it on Amazon, but it was out of print. So I did a little bit of digging and realized by reading the reviews that Don't Let Me Die, the self-published version, is no longer being offered because the book was picked up by Book Couture, which does a lot, I think, a lot of psychological thrillers, if I'm not mistaken. And it was re-released as the book The Last Thing I Saw. Sorry that's so bright, but now, at that point, I realized I also had purchased The Last Thing That I Saw, or The Last Thing I Saw, because the author, Book Couture, nor Amazon disclosed that this book was actually this book. Am I mad about that? No, I'm not mad about that. I feel like if I'd have read the reviews of I don't know which one I purchased first, but had I read the reviews a little bit more closely, I might have been alerted to the fact that I was buying what amounts to the same book. There are some differences about The Last Thing That I Saw, which, The Last Thing I Saw, why do I keep adding a that? There are some differences, which is to be expected because a publisher has come in and sort of offered some more professional, probably editing, or it could just be that Alex Sinclair was given the opportunity to perfect something that he had previously published and had been thinking about different ways that it could have improved. I don't know. So I was faced with a dilemma. I owned both copies. Don't Let Me Die was the official Pick My Book result. But I thought I might be able to more highly recommend the professionally or traditionally published version. Here's why that plan was just blown to smithereens. So I told you that this book never claims to be this book. The difference between the two is that Don't Let Me Die, the self-published version, discloses immediately that there is a woman in a psychiatric hospital who has blocked out the memory of a traumatic experience of having to choose between her husband's life and her son's life. It discloses that immediately. And so you know that's what you're trying to figure out. Now, The Last Thing I Saw does not. This book is leading up to the revelation that she was ultimately responsible for either her husband or her son dying. Telling you whom would be giving it away. I'm not going to do that. But the main reveal of this book is something I already knew. You know, this book is saying the woman in the psychiatric hospital has completely blocked out the events of that night, and, you know, she knows she's done something terrible. She's in a psych ward. She's being told she did something terrible. They're trying to uncover how all of that came to be, how all of the pieces fit into this strange puzzle. She is the key. She doesn't know why no one in her family is coming to visit her. Like, I read this book knowing all of those, you know, all of that. And so I'm probably going to, I'm ruining this book for you by telling you, you know, we were already discussing the major twist of this book simply because it was the published version of Don't Let Me Die. So I thoroughly read The Last Thing I Saw. After I finished it, I skimmed through Don't Let Me Die to see how many differences there actually were. And there are some pretty, I don't know if I would call them significant. In this original book, she named her son Frank. And in this book, she named her son Jaden. First things first, don't buy both of these books. Only buy one or the other. Pick your poison, basically. Second thing is how did I feel? How did I feel about these books? Okay, so like I said, I read the professionally published book, thinking it would be a better experience, and this book was not very good. Most of it was tedious, and I say that because I already knew half of the major reveal. So I was really just like, come on, figure it out. You can do it. I can't stand in fiction when I know something long before the main character does, and I have to just sit around and wait for them to figure it out. I kind of like to figure things out real time with my protagonist. And unfortunately, that was totally not the case. The only thing I was waiting to find out in this instance was which individual she picked to live, basically. This book is told in a dual timeline, and obviously we're in the present time with her in the psychiatric hospital, and each of her psychiatric sessions, the book transitions into the other timeline, or the book skips or changes into the other timeline. So like she's retelling the events from before the incident. And I don't want to say that I hate dual timelines, because that's not true, but I hate dual timelines. I don't like dual timelines when there's nothing at stake in the time in which I exist. So, for instance, our main character is tucked safely in a psychiatric hospital. Meanwhile, all of the action and all of the suspense and all of the buildup is taking place in this other timeline, which is of the past. All of that suspense and that buildup and that action is filtered through a character who I know to be sitting in an office talking. And it just dulls down the experience for me. I've said many times that my attraction to books, specifically the books that I read, has to do with chasing certain feelings and reactions from myself and stuff like that. And when an author chooses to place a filter, typically a character, between me and that excitement, I'm immediately put off by that. Don't get me wrong, there are dual timelines that are done masterfully, but that was not the case here. The timeline of the present is very tedious, and not a ton happens, and what does happen is sort of a bit unbelievable. Like this, first of all, much like a lot of the books that we discuss on this channel, you have to suspend disbelief to read this book. However, I found myself unable to suspend it enough to enjoy it, to just let myself get immersed in the story and enjoy it. I think that her being in a psychiatric hospital, those conditions are told very cliche, very stereotypically, not at all what it's like. It was just a very tedious portion of the book. I found myself just wanting to read all about the past. And so let's talk about the past, that other timeline, that other narrative that takes place in the past. It contained, I will tell you that this book has a lot of suspense in it. It has a lot of well-loved and sometimes overused devices to build suspense and to kind of increase the anxiety of the reader. And so it was successful at that. I mean, this is a page turner if you're only in that narrative. Everything else, you're hitting the brakes. The present timeline is slowing you down, and the past is maybe what is the most interesting. That said, again, it's another storyline that completely demands that you suspend disbelief. Like, it's it's outrageous. Like, some of the things that happen are truly outrageous. Our main character, Emma, inherited money. Her husband used it to open a construction company. He's a contractor. And at the beginning of the book, we know that there's been an accident on one of his work sites, and one of his employees has been really injured, and his business is facing some serious consequences. We learn that right away. And then from there, things just keep getting more and more and more crazy. The family's being stalked, the family's being threatened, the family's being harassed. And it all culminates into this ransom demand from someone who doesn't have anything of theirs. He wants $200,000 or he'll kill them. But he doesn't have any of them. They're all free. They're all walking free when someone threatens to kill them unless they receive $200,000. But they go through with that whole process anyway. And I don't want to spoil the book, but I feel like we've already somehow done that just by the weird circumstance of these two novels. The ending is identical, but the events leading up to the ending, right after the big reveal, those are slightly different. It is way more ridiculous in Don't Let Me Die than it is The Last Thing I Saw. It's ridiculous in this book. It's doubly ridiculous in this book. So I'm grateful that I eliminated 2 books off my shelf this month with your pick. So thank you. I owe you guys a tremendous debt of gratitude. But ultimately, I can't really recommend either one. I think that this book is made bad by the existence of this book. If this book didn't exist, then this would just be a sort of hyperbolic psychological thriller where things are a little outlandish, but sometimes we read thrillers for really outlandish things. My favorite thriller of all time is now a book where a husband and wife kill people to spice up their romance. So, I can forgive the book for being a little crazy, a little silly, a little out there, but the existence of this sucker totally ruins this sucker. So I can understand not divulging that they're the same book. However, there's some people out there who are pretty pissed because if they read this book and liked Alex Sinclair, then they probably got really excited when this one came out and they purchased it thinking it was another Alex Sinclair book. The synopses are completely different. I get it, but I think they should have come up with a way to sort of prevent that from happening for thriller fans purchasing from Amazon. I don't know, maybe only 50 people or so bought this, but I have absolutely no idea. But if it was a goodly number of people bought this book, then I think that the publisher, it was their responsibility to disclose that people who own Don't Let Me Die by Alex Sinclair should not purchase The Last Thing I Saw without first realizing that they were getting the exact same story. I'm nowhere near sitting down to read my July Pick My Book selection, so that's still up in the air. The comments aren't exactly rolling in anymore. I think that I don't know where I was keeping the tally. So far, The Marriage Pact by Michelle Richmond is winning for July, but only by 1 vote. So when I sit down and I say, okay, it's time to read my Pick My Book selection, that is when I will officially decide which book is the winner. So if you are watching this video and you didn't see the other, you didn't vote on what book you want me to read in July, hop on over to that video. I will leave it linked for you in the cards. Hop on over to that video and give me your opinion on which one I should read. Hopefully, we'll never come across this sort of situation again. Hopefully. This was crazy. But, yay, 2 physical books off my I couldn't, it's amazing. Okay. If you have any other questions about these 2 books or about this crazy circumstance we found ourselves in, or if you have read them or read them knowing that I was going to read one of them or the other of them, leave me your opinions, your questions, your comments in the section down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.